In a room filled with Seoul's most powerful women, a 7-year-old boy just made the choice that would bring his father's criminal empire to its knees. The golden light of the Gangnam estate's ballroom reflected off diamonds worth millions as 5 socialites stood in a perfect line, each one handpicked by Seong-jin himself, the man who controlled Seoul's underworld with an iron fist. His son Byung had been silent for 2 years, ever since his mother disappeared, and tonight was supposed to fix everything. "Choose your new mother," Seong-jin commanded, his voice cold as winter steel. The heiresses smiled wider. The daughter of a politician stepped forward. The chaebol princess touched her flawless hair. But Byung's eyes weren't searching the line of designer gowns and practiced elegance. They were scanning the shadows near the doorway where a black woman in a plain maid's uniform balanced a silver tray, trying to become invisible. Then Byung moved. Past the silk. Past the pearls. Past the women who could give him everything money could buy. His small hand reached out and grabbed the edge of Sarah Eaton's apron. "I don't want them, father," he whispered, his first words in months. "I want the lady who sings to me when I'm scared." The room froze. Sarah's heart stopped. And Seong-jin realized his son had just chosen the one woman in Seoul who could destroy everything he'd built. Sarah Eaton had perfected the art of disappearing. In the 3 months she'd worked at the Gangnam estate, she'd learned to move through rooms like smoke, present but unnoticed, essential but invisible. It was a survival skill she'd honed back in New York, when disappearing meant staying alive. The estate was a fortress disguised as luxury. Marble floors that echoed every footstep. Security cameras in carved wooden frames. Men in expensive suits who never smiled, their jackets cut loose enough to hide weapons. Sarah had recognized what this place was within hours of arriving, the same kind of power structure she'd fled, just wrapped in different silk. She'd answered an ad for a live-in housekeeper, desperate enough not to ask questions when they didn't check her references too carefully. The pay was generous. The rules were simple. Clean, cook, stay quiet, see nothing. Perfect for a woman who needed to vanish. The other staff avoided the 3rd floor where Seong-jin's private quarters were located, but Sarah was assigned to clean there every morning at 6. The Mafia boss himself was a ghost in his own home, leaving before dawn, returning after midnight, his presence marked only by the smell of expensive cologne and the whiskey glass left on his desk. But his son was different. Byung appeared one morning as Sarah was dusting the hallway, a small figure in expensive pajamas standing barefoot on cold marble. 7 years old with eyes too old for his face. He didn't speak. None of the staff had ever heard him speak, but he watched her with an intensity that made her chest ache with recognition. She'd seen that look before, in her clinical practice back in New York. Trauma wrapped in silence. "Good morning," she'd said softly, not expecting a response. He'd simply stared. The next morning, he was there again. And the next. Sarah began leaving small things in the hallway, a smooth stone from the garden, a flower press between book pages, a folded origami crane she'd made from scrap paper. She never mentioned them. Never made it into a transaction. Just left them where he'd find them. Gifts from the invisible woman. 1 week in, she heard crying from Byung's room at 2 a.m. She knew she shouldn't intervene. The rules were clear about boundaries, but her training wouldn't let her walk away from a child in distress. She'd knocked softly, entered without permission, found him tangled in sheets soaked with nightmare sweat. "Hey, sweetheart," she'd whispered, keeping her distance. "Bad dreams." He'd nodded, tears tracking down his cheeks. Sarah had done what her mother used to do, what she'd done for countless children in her practice. She'd started humming, then singing, an old lullaby her grandmother taught her, the words in a language Byung wouldn't understand but the melody universal in its comfort. She didn't touch him, didn't turn on the lights, just sat on the floor near his bed and sang until his breathing steadied. She'd returned to her room expecting to be fired by morning. Instead, Byung began appearing wherever she worked. Silent. Watching. Sometimes standing so close she could feel his small presence like a shadow. The other staff noticed but said nothing. In this house, everyone had learned to mind their business. Sarah started singing while she cleaned his room, humming while she folded his clothes, speaking to him in soft tones about nothing important. The weather, the birds outside, stories about a childhood she'd left behind. She never expected responses. Never pushed. Just offered what she'd once offered her: patience. Witness without judgment, presence without demand. The breakthrough came 6 weeks after she'd started. She was making his bed when she felt him tug her sleeve. When she turned, Byung was holding out a drawing. Crude but clear. 2 figures. One tall, one small. Both smiling. "Is that us?" she'd asked gently. He'd nodded. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. "Stay." That single word had shattered something in Sarah's chest. In trying to disappear, she'd been found. And worse, she'd started to care about the silent boy in the fortress, which meant she was already in danger. She just didn't know how much. Seong-jin's office smelled like leather and threat. Sarah stood in front of his desk at 7 in the morning, still in her maid's uniform, while the man who controlled Seoul's underworld studied her like she was a problem requiring elimination. "My son spoke last night," he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of a man unused to being challenged. His first words in 2 years. "Do you know what he said?" Sarah's mouth went dry. She shook her head. "He said he wanted you to stay. That you make the nightmares stop." Seong-jin leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Explain to me why my son trusts a woman I know nothing about." The unspoken threat hung in the air. Sarah had been running long enough to recognize an interrogation disguised as a conversation. "I don't know, Mr. Han. I hear him crying sometimes. I try to help." "You try to help." He repeated the words like they were foreign. His fingers drummed once against the mahogany desk. "I had you investigated last night. Sarah Eaton. Undocumented. No verifiable work history beyond 6 months. The woman who hired you is no longer employed here. She clearly didn't follow protocol." His eyes locked onto hers. "Give me one reason I shouldn't have you deported by lunch." Sarah's heart hammered. This was it. The moment her carefully constructed invisibility shattered. "I have nowhere else to go. Not my problem." "He needs." Sarah stopped herself, but Seong-jin raised an eyebrow. "Finish that sentence." She shouldn't. Every survival instinct screamed to stay quiet, apologize, accept whatever came next. But the clinical part of her brain, the part that had spent years treating traumatized children, wouldn't let her walk away. He needs consistency. Stability. Whatever happened to him, to his mother, left him with selective mutism triggered by abandonment anxiety. "If you send me away now, you'll confirm his worst fear that anyone he trusts will disappear." The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a blade. "You sound like a psychologist," Seong-jin said slowly. Sarah said nothing. She'd already revealed too much. He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the estate's gardens where Byung was visible in the distance, sitting alone on a bench. "Here's what's going to happen. You will become Byung's caretaker. Not his friend. Not his mother. His caretaker. You'll live in the room adjacent to his. You'll be available when he needs you. In exchange, your salary triples and your legal status becomes my problem." It wasn't an offer. It was a command wrapped in the illusion of choice. "There are rules," he continued, turning back to face her. "You don't ask questions about my business. You don't speak to anyone outside this estate without my approval. You don't form attachments beyond what's necessary for Byung's care. And most importantly," his voice dropped to something colder than before, "you remember that you're here because my son pointed at you. The moment you stop being useful, you stop being protected. There are 5 women who left here humiliated last night, and at least 3 of them have families powerful enough to make you disappear. Permanently." Sarah's throat tightened. She'd escaped one dangerous man in New York only to be owned by another in Seoul. "Do we have an understanding?" She nodded. Use your words, Miss Eaton. Yes, Mr. Han. You'll start immediately. Mrs. Choi will move your belongings and show you your new quarters. You'll take meals with Byung. You'll accompany him to his tutoring sessions. You'll be present but not familiar in any public setting. He sat back down, already turning his attention to papers on his desk. A dismissal. And Miss Eaton? My son may trust you, but I don't. Earn it, or regret it. Those are your only options. Sarah left the office with her hands shaking. She'd been promoted from invisible maid to visible prisoner. And the worst part was realizing that somewhere in the past 6 weeks, she'd started to care enough about the silent boy that she'd accept these chains willingly. She just hoped they wouldn't strangle her. Sarah's new quarters were a gilded cage, silk curtains, imported furniture, and a door that connected directly to Byung's room. A door that had no lock on her side. For the first week, she moved carefully through her new role, hyper-aware that she was being watched. Security cameras tracked her movements through the hallways. The household staff treated her differently now. Not quite management, not quite peer, something uncomfortably in between. And Seong-jin himself appeared without warning at odd hours, observing her interactions with Byung with the cold assessment of a man evaluating an asset. But it was during those observations that Sarah began to see the full picture of Byung's trauma. The way he flinched when doors slammed. How he couldn't sleep without a light on. The compulsive way he checked to make sure she was still there. Sometimes waking 3 or 4 times a night just to see her shadow in the connecting doorway. Classic attachment disorder with traumatic mutism. She'd written papers on this back in New York. 2 weeks into her new position, Sarah made a decision that would either save Byung or destroy her. She began treating him in secret. It started small. Art therapy disguised as drawing time. She'd sit with him after breakfast, spreading paper and colored pencils across the table, and simply create alongside him. No pressure. No expectations. Just presence and validation. You can draw anything you want, she'd say softly. There's no wrong answer here. His first drawings were all the same. A woman with long dark hair, her face scribbled out with black crayon until the paper tore. Sarah's clinical heart broke recognizing what he couldn't say. His mother had left, and his child's mind had tried to erase her to stop the pain. She introduced play therapy next, using toy figures during their afternoon sessions. Byung would arrange them obsessively. Always a small figure protected by a larger one, always a third figure turned away or knocked down. What's happening in your story? Sarah would ask. He couldn't answer with words yet, but his hands spoke volumes. The small figure was always searching. Always abandoned. Always afraid. Sarah started teaching him emotional regulation through breathing exercises disguised as games. Let's pretend we're blowing out birthday candles, she'd say, demonstrating slow, controlled breaths. Byung would mimic her, his small chest rising and falling, his panic attacks becoming less frequent. She was making progress. Real, measurable progress. And she was doing it all under the radar, in the spaces between her official duties. Hoping Seong-jin wouldn't notice she was practicing psychology without permission in his home. She should have known better. It was during a session 3 weeks in. Sarah had just introduced a simple narrative therapy technique, asking Byung to arrange toy figures to show what happened before, when she felt the temperature in the room change. She looked up to find Seong-jin standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Mr. Han, Continue, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Don't let me interrupt your session. Session. He'd used the clinical word deliberately. He knew. Sarah's hands trembled as she turned back to Byung, who had frozen, his eyes darting between his father and the toys. It's okay, sweetheart. Your dad's just watching. But Byung shook his head violently, sweeping the figures off the table. He ran to his room, slamming the connecting door. The silence that followed felt like drowning. My office, Seong-jin said. Now. Sarah followed him through the estate, her mind racing through explanations, justifications, apologies. He closed his office door with controlled precision, somehow more terrifying than if he'd slammed it. You lied to me. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. You're not just a caretaker. You're a psychologist. Former psychologist, Sarah whispered. I don't practice anymore. Why not? The question cut too close to the bone. Sarah looked away. I can't. Can't or won't. He moved closer, and she could smell his cologne mixed with something sharper. Anger, tightly leashed. I asked you if you had relevant experience. You said you tried to help. That was deliberate misdirection. You would have seen me as a threat. Someone who might analyze you instead of just caring for your son. I see you as a threat now. His voice dropped lower. You've been conducting therapy on my child without my consent. Using techniques I don't understand for purposes I can't verify. Give me one reason I shouldn't terminate this arrangement immediately. Sarah met his eyes, fear giving way to something fiercer. Because it's working. He's sleeping through the night. His panic attacks have decreased by 60%. He drew a picture yesterday where the woman's face wasn't scribbled out. Her voice cracked. He's healing, Mr. Han. And if you take that away from him now, you'll do more damage than whatever broke him in the first place. Seong-jin stared at her for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he moved to his desk, pulled out a file, and dropped it in front of her. Sarah's blood turned to ice. It was her life, her real life, spread across those pages. Dr. Sarah Eaton, child psychologist. Her Manhattan practice. The case that had gone wrong. The family that had come after her. Everything she'd been running from. I know why you can't practice anymore, he said quietly. I know what you're hiding from. And I know that if certain people discovered you were alive and in Seoul, you'd be dead within 48 hours. He paused. So here's my new rule, Dr. Eaton. You continue treating my son. Officially. Transparently. You report his progress to me weekly. And in exchange, I make sure your past stays buried. It was another cage, prettier than the last. But if you ever lie to me again, Seong-jin added, his voice like frost, protection ends. Do we have an understanding? Sarah nodded, her throat too tight for words. Good. Now go fix what you broke. My son is waiting for you. She left his office realizing that Seong-jin wasn't just dangerous because he controlled an empire. He was dangerous because he understood leverage. And he'd just made her survival dependent on Byung's recovery. The only question was whether she was treating the boy to save him, or to save herself. The invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. An evening of reconciliation. Sarah knew a trap when she saw one. You'll attend, Seong-jin informed her that morning, his tone making it clear this wasn't optional. The women from the selection ceremony have requested a formal dinner. Declining would be seen as weakness. They want to humiliate me, Sarah said flatly. Undoubtedly. He adjusted his cufflinks without looking at her. Don't give them the satisfaction. Easy for him to say. He wouldn't be the only person in the room who'd been pulled from scrubbing floors to playing dress-up in someone else's life. The evening arrived too quickly. Sarah stood in front of her mirror, barely recognizing herself in the emerald silk dress that had been delivered to her room. Seong-jin's stylist had ensured she looked the part, even if she didn't feel it. Her natural curls were styled elegantly, her makeup understated but flawless. She looked like she belonged at this table. She knew better. The private dining room of the Shilla Hotel was everything Sarah expected. Crystal chandeliers, a table set for 8, and 5 women who smiled like sharks scenting blood. They dressed for war in designer armor. Kim Min-young, the chaebol heiress, Park Yoona, daughter of a Supreme Court justice, Lee Seo-yeon, a television actress, Choi Ji-won, old money with a pedigree longer than the table, and Kong Hae-jin, whose family controlled half the luxury real estate in Gangnam. Seong-jin sat at the head of the table, his expression neutral. Byung was mercifully absent. Sarah had insisted he didn't need to witness this. "Miss Eaton," Minyoung purred as Sarah took her seat. "How unexpected to see you here. In that chair. Wearing that dress." The implication was clear. Wearing things that don't belong to you. "Mrs. Kim," Sarah replied evenly. "Thank you for the invitation." "Oh, we insisted," Seo-yeon added, her smile saccharine. "We've been so curious about the woman who captivated dear little Byung. Tell us, what's your secret? Do you sing to all the men in the house, or just the vulnerable ones?" The table tittered. Seong-jin's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. This was Sarah's test. She could feel them circling, looking for weakness. Her old training kicked in, years of reading microexpressions, understanding power dynamics, knowing that the person who reacts emotionally loses. "I don't have secrets," Sarah said calmly, reaching for her water glass. "I just listened when he needed someone to hear him." "Radical concept, I know." "How noble," Ji-won interjected, her voice dripping condescension. "The help, elevated by a child's whim. It's very Cinderella. Except in that story, the girl was actually special." "What are you really?" "A maid who got lucky." Sarah set down her glass with deliberate care. Here was the moment. She could shrink, defend herself, prove their point. Or she could do what she'd done in dozens of high-stakes family therapy sessions. Redirect the narrative. "You're right," Sarah said, and watched their eyes light up with premature victory. "I'm not special. I don't have your family connections, your wealth, your social standing. Byung didn't choose me because I'm extraordinary." She paused, meeting each woman's gaze in turn. "He chose me because I was the only one who saw him as a person instead of a transaction." The silence that followed had teeth. "That's what happens when you spend 2 hours at a selection ceremony, performing for a father instead of connecting with a traumatized child," Sarah continued, her voice remaining steady. "You treated that little boy like a judge in a pageant. I treated him like a human being who was scared and grieving. And he knew the difference." Minyoung's face flushed. "How dare you?" "I dare because it's true." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "You want to know why you're really angry? It's not because I'm unworthy. It's because a 7-year-old saw through your performance in 30 seconds, and that terrifies you. What does it say about you that a child preferred genuine kindness from a maid over calculated charm from Seoul's elite?" Yuna's practiced smile cracked. "You're out of line." "Am I?" "You invited me here to humiliate me, to remind me of my place. But here's what I think. I think you're the ones who feel humiliated. You got rejected by a child, and instead of examining why, you're trying to destroy the person he chose. That's not strength. That's insecurity dressed in couture." The temperature in the room plummeted. Hygiene stood abruptly. "We don't have to listen to this." "Then leave," Sarah said simply. "But before you do, ask yourself, if you were a traumatized child who'd lost his mother, who would you choose? The woman who sees you, or the woman who sees an opportunity?" It was Seong-jin who broke the silence, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Dinner is over. Ladies, thank you for your candor. My driver will see you home." The 5 women left in a flurry of designer handbags and wounded pride. Sarah sat frozen, her heart pounding, realizing she'd just made 5 powerful enemies. When they were alone, Seong-jin poured himself a drink. "That was reckless." "I know. Also brilliant." He studied her over the rim of his glass. "You didn't defend yourself. You made them defend themselves. Psychologist trick. Basic human nature. People who attack from insecurity will always retreat when you name what they're hiding." He nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. "Respect, maybe, or recognition. They'll retaliate." "Let them," Sarah said, surprised by her own steel. "I've survived worse than social warfare." Seong-jin's eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. I believe you have, Dr. Eaton. It was the first time he'd used her title without it sounding like a weapon. Sarah realized with uncomfortable clarity that she'd just passed some invisible test, and that Seong-jin was starting to see her as something other than a means to an end. She wasn't sure if that made her safer, or in far more danger. The whispers started in the clubs of Itaewon and spread through the underground like poison. Seong-jin, the Iron Dragon of Seoul, had gone soft. Domesticated. Brought to heel by a foreign woman and his 7-year-old son. Sarah heard the rumors third hand from Mrs. Choi, whose cousin worked security at one of the syndicate's nightclubs. They're saying Mr. Han has lost his edge, the older woman murmured while folding laundry. That he's playing house while his rivals circle. Sarah's stomach twisted. She'd been so focused on Byung's recovery that she hadn't considered how her presence might be weaponized against Seong-jin. In this world, perception was everything. And right now, the perception was that Seoul's most feared crime lord had been weakened by a woman who'd been scrubbing his floors 3 months ago. She should have known the reckoning would come. It arrived on a Friday night in the form of Kang Dae-young, head of the Busan faction and Seong-jin's most vocal rival. Sarah was reading to Byung in the estate's library when she heard raised voices from the main hall. She moved to close the door, but Byung's hand gripped her sleeve, his eyes wide with recognition. He knew that voice. He was afraid of it. Stay here, Sarah whispered, but even as she said it, she heard footsteps approaching. Heavy. Multiple sets. Wrong. Kang Dae-young entered the library like he owned it, 3 of his men flanking him. He was shorter than Seong-jin but built like a brawler, his expensive suit barely containing the violence underneath. His eyes found Sarah immediately. Assessment followed by crude amusement. So this is the famous Maid, he said in Korean, his voice carrying the particular mockery of a man who enjoyed humiliation. Seong-jin's little American pet. I had to see for myself what could make a dragon forget he has teeth. Sarah stood, positioning herself between Kang and Byung. Mr. Han isn't here. You should leave. You speak Korean. How charming. Kang moved closer, deliberately invading her space. Tell me, what services do you provide that were worth humiliating Seoul's most eligible women? Must be something special. The implication was intentionally vile. Sarah felt Byung press against her back, trembling. I provide care for his son. That's all. That's all, Kang repeated, laughing. You hear that? She provides care. Like a nurse. Like a whore. He reached out as if to touch her face. I wonder if Seong-jin shares his. The word died as Seong-jin's hand closed around Kang's wrist with enough force that Sarah heard bones creak. Finish that sentence, Seong-jin said quietly, appearing from nowhere, his voice carrying the promise of extreme violence. Please. The library transformed into a standoff. Kang's men reached for weapons. The estate security materialized in the doorway, already armed. Byung whimpered, and Sarah pulled him close, her heart hammering against her ribs. Kang tried to laugh it off, but Sarah saw the flash of fear in his eyes. Ah, there's the dragon. I was starting to think the rumors were true. That you'd gone soft. You came into my home, Seong-jin's grip tightened, and Kang winced. You threatened my son's caretaker. You disrespected my household. Give me one reason I shouldn't break every bone in your hand and send you back to Busan as an example. Because it would start a war. You think I'm afraid of war? Seong-jin twisted Kang's wrist, forcing him to his knees. The movement was surgical, controlled, terrifying in its precision. I've built my empire on war. What I'm afraid of is men like you thinking my patience is weakness. Sarah watched something shift in Seong-jin's expression. A coldness she'd never seen before, the mask of the businessman falling away to reveal the predator underneath. The only reason you're leaving here intact is because my son is watching, Seong-jin continued, his voice dropping to something barely audible. And I don't want him to see what I do to men who threaten what's mine. But Kang? If you ever speak about Dr. Eaton again, if you even think her name, I will dismantle your organization piece by piece. I will burn your clubs. I will destroy your shipping routes. I will make you irrelevant." He released Kang's wrist with a shove. "Now get out of my house." Kang stumbled to his feet, cradling his injured hand, his face flushed with humiliation and rage. "You'll regret this, Seong-jin. Choosing a whore over the syndicate." The punch came so fast Sarah almost missed it. Seong-jin's fist connected with Kang's jaw with a crack that echoed through the library. Kang hit the floor hard, blood streaming from his mouth. "I warned you," Seong-jin said calmly, adjusting his cufflinks. To Kang's men, "Take him. If he's still in Seoul by morning, I'll consider it an act of war." They dragged their boss out, leaving drops of blood on the marble floor. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah realized she was shaking, still holding Byung, who had buried his face in her side. Seong-jin's security dispersed with silent efficiency, and then it was just the three of them in the library. Seong-jin turned to them, and Sarah saw his hands were trembling too. Not from fear, but from barely contained rage. "Are you hurt?" Sarah shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Byung." The boy peeked out, then ran to his father. Seong-jin caught him, holding him with a gentleness that contradicted the violence of seconds before. Over Byung's head, his eyes met Sarah's. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "I should have anticipated this. Should have protected you better." "You just did," Sarah whispered. "No." His jaw tightened. "I put a target on your back the moment Byung chose you. And now every rival I have knows that hurting you would hurt me." He set Byung down gently. "Go to your room, son. Sarah will be there in a moment." When they were alone, Seong-jin moved to the window, his back to her. "You were right at that dinner party. You said you'd survived worse than social warfare. But this isn't social warfare anymore, Dr. Eaton. This is the real thing. And I need to know, are you prepared for what that means?" Sarah thought about New York. About the family that had hunted her. About choosing to run rather than fight. "I'm still here, aren't I?" He turned, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "For now." But Kang was right about one thing. I have made you a target. The question is whether I've also made you safe enough to survive it. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Then I guess we'll find out together." Something flickered in Seong-jin's expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "Yes," he said finally. "I suppose we will." But as Sarah left to comfort Byung, she couldn't shake the feeling that the ground beneath them had shifted. Seong-jin hadn't just defended an employee. He'd defended her. And in doing so, he'd revealed something neither of them was ready to acknowledge. The dragon had found something worth protecting beyond his empire. And that made them all vulnerable. The nightmare hit Byung harder than usual. 3 a.m., his screams echoing through the third floor. Sarah was there in seconds, but when she opened the connecting door, she found Seong-jin already sitting on the edge of his son's bed, looking lost. "I don't know what to do," he said quietly, and Sarah realized it was the first time she'd heard genuine helplessness in his voice. Byung was thrashing, still caught in whatever terror had seized him, and Seong-jin's hands hovered uselessly, afraid to touch, afraid to make it worse. "May I?" Sarah asked. He nodded, moving aside. She used the techniques that had become routine over the past months. The soft humming, the gentle pressure on Byung's shoulder, the whispered reassurances that he was safe, that she was here, that nothing could hurt him. Slowly, the boy's breathing steadied. His eyes opening to find her face in the dim light. "Mama," he whispered, the words slurred with sleep and sorrow. Sarah's heart cracked. "I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe." He reached for her, and she held him until he drifted back into quieter sleep. When she finally looked up, Seong-jin was still sitting there, watching them with an expression she couldn't read. "He calls you that sometimes," Seong-jin said. "Mama." I've heard him. I know. I'm sorry, I never encouraged. Don't apologize. He stood, moving toward the door, then stopped. Can we talk? In my study? It wasn't really a question. Sarah followed him down the hall to a room she'd only cleaned, never entered while he was present. It was different at night. The city lights through the windows painting everything in shades of blue and gold. Seong-jin poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking if she wanted one, handed her one, and then did something that shocked her. He sat on the couch instead of behind his desk, the barrier of authority momentarily abandoned. Her name was Seo, he began, staring into his glass. Byung's mother. We married young, an arrangement between families, like most marriages in this world. I didn't love her. She didn't love me. But we were compatible. We had an understanding. Sarah sipped her whiskey, saying nothing, letting him find his way through whatever he needed to say. Then Byung was born, and something changed in her. Not the way you'd expect. Not love, but terror. She'd look at him like he was a cage closing around her. Seong-jin's jaw tightened. I didn't understand it then. Postpartum depression, anxiety. I didn't have words for it. In my world, you don't show weakness. You don't ask for help. You endure. But she couldn't, Sarah said softly. No. She tried. For almost 5 years she tried. Put on the perfect wife performance, the devoted mother act. And then one morning, I woke up and she was gone. No note. No explanation. Just vanished. He finally looked at Sarah. I used every resource I had to find her. Called in every favor. Threatened every contact. It took 3 weeks. Sarah's chest tightened. Where was she? At the bottom of the Han River. She'd walked in with stones in her pockets. His voice remained steady, clinical, but Sarah could hear the fractures underneath. The autopsy showed enough sedatives in her system to kill her twice over. She'd planned it carefully. Made sure there was no chance of survival, no possibility of rescue. Oh God, Seong-jin. It was the first time she'd used his given name. He noticed something shifting in his expression. Byung was at a friend's house when it happened. He didn't know. I never told him. I said she'd gone away for work, that she'd come back. I thought I was protecting him. Seong-jin's laugh was bitter. But children know. They sense things adults try to hide. He stopped talking 6 months after she died, and I realized I'd made everything worse. Sarah set down her glass, her clinical training warring with something more human. You did what you thought was right. Grief doesn't come with instructions. I told myself I didn't care. That she was weak, that she'd chosen the coward's way out. But the truth is, I failed her. I saw her struggling and I did nothing because in my world, you don't acknowledge pain. You don't admit vulnerability. He met Sarah's eyes. And then you came along, and I watched you do everything I couldn't. You saw my son's pain and you didn't look away. You didn't perform strength. You offered actual comfort. And I hated you for it. Hated me. Because you made it look easy. Because you succeeded where I'd failed. He leaned back, exhaustion written across his features. That night, when Byung chose you, I was furious. Not at him. At myself. Because my 7-year-old son understood what he needed better than I did. The confession hung between them, raw and undefended. Sarah understood she was seeing something few people ever witnessed. The man behind the dragon, vulnerable and human and breaking. You're not your wife, Seong-jin, Sarah said carefully. And Byung isn't you. What happened to Seo was a tragedy, but it doesn't mean you failed. Mental illness isn't something you can control or fix through willpower. But I could have tried harder. Could have seen the signs. Maybe. Or maybe she hid them too well. People do that. They perform normalcy until they can't anymore. Sarah thought about her own running, her own secrets. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is admit they're drowning. Minicio couldn't do that. But you can. He looked at her for a long moment, and Sarah saw the exact instant the professional wall between them crumbled completely. Not because of attraction or chemistry, but because of something more dangerous, genuine recognition. Two people who'd built fortresses around their pain, suddenly glimpsing the architecture of each other's survival. "You're drowning too," he said quietly. "Aren't you? Whatever you're running from in New York, it's still chasing you." Sarah's throat tightened. "Every day. Then maybe we're both survivors pretending to be strong. Or maybe we're both strong people learning it's okay to survive imperfectly." Seong-jin smiled then, and it transformed his face, softening the hard edges, revealing someone younger and more uncertain than the man who ruled Seoul's underworld. "When did you become wise, Dr. Eaton?" "When I stopped pretending I had all the answers." They sat in comfortable silence, the city breathing below them, two broken people finding unexpected kinship in their fractures. Sarah knew this was dangerous, allowing herself to see Seong-jin as human, to care about his pain as much as his son's. Boundaries existed for reasons, and she was obliterating all of them. But when he reached across the space between them and took her hand, not possessively, not romantically, just human contact between two people who understood loneliness, she didn't pull away. "Thank you," he said simply. "For saving him. For trying to save both of us." Sarah squeezed his hand once before releasing it. "We're not saved yet. But maybe we're learning how to start." She left him there in his study, but something fundamental had shifted. They'd stopped being employer and employee, stopped being captor and captive. They'd become something more complicated, more dangerous. They'd become allies in survival. And Sarah knew from experience that alliances forged in trauma either saved you or destroyed you. There was rarely anything in between. The mountain estate was supposed to be a refuge. 2 hours north of Seoul, nestled in forest so dense it swallowed sound, it was where Seong-jin's family had retreated for generations. He'd suggested the weekend trip almost casually. Byung needed fresh air, Sarah needed distance from the city's pressure, and perhaps Seong-jin himself needed space to breathe outside his empire's watchful eyes. Sarah should have recognized the mistake. Safe places were illusions. She'd learned that in New York. They arrived Friday evening, the house staff having prepared everything in advance. The estate was smaller than the Gangnam property but more intimate. Exposed wooden beams, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley, a warmth the city house lacked. Byung was excited, running through rooms he half-remembered from early childhood. And for the first time in months, Sarah let herself relax. That was her second mistake. Saturday passed in unexpected peace. Byung played in the garden while Sarah and Seong-jin sat on the terrace, talking about nothing important. Books, music, the kind of conversation people have when they're learning each other outside crisis. She caught him watching her with an expression that made her chest tight, something tender breaking through his usual reserve. "You're different here," she observed. "So are you." He smiled slightly. "Less defensive. Less ready to run. Maybe I'm tired of running." His hand found hers on the table, and this time neither of them pretended it was accidental. "Then stay." The moment crystallized, perfect and fragile. Sarah was about to respond when Seong-jin's head snapped toward the driveway, his entire body going rigid. "That's not our security rotation," he said quietly, already standing. "Sarah, take Byung inside. Now." She heard it then. Vehicles approaching, too many, too fast. Her training kicked in before her fear did. She grabbed Byung from the garden, ignoring his protests, and ran for the house. The first gunshot shattered the evening silence. Seong-jin shoved them through the door, his phone already out. "Panic room. 3rd floor. Behind the bookcase in my bedroom. Code is Byung's birthday. Don't come out until I." The front window exploded inward. Seong-jin went down hard, blood blooming across his shoulder. Sarah screamed, But he was already moving, returning fire with a weapon she hadn't known he was carrying, providing cover as she dragged Byung toward the stairs. "Go!" he shouted. "Protect him!" Sarah ran, Byung clutching her hand, his silence now loaded with terror. Behind them, she heard more gunfire, shouting in Korean, the organized chaos of an assault. This wasn't random. This was planned. They reached Seong-jin's room. Sarah's hand shook as she found the panel behind the bookcase, punched in the code, 0-7-1-8. The door clicked open, revealing a reinforced room equipped with monitors, communications equipment, weapons she didn't know how to use. She pulled Byung inside and sealed the door. The monitors showed multiple feeds from security cameras throughout the estate. Sarah's heart stopped as she found Seong-jin on one screen, pinned down in the living room, wounded, outnumbered. 4 men in tactical gear were advancing, and his security team was nowhere visible. They'd been betrayed. Someone inside had fed information, planned this hit when Seong-jin was most vulnerable. Byung whimpered, and Sarah forced herself to focus. Panic helped no one. She scanned the communications panel, found the emergency broadcast system. Her hands moved over controls she barely understood, activating the estate-wide security lockdown Seong-jin had once mentioned in passing. Steel shutters began descending over windows. Doors locked automatically. The tactical team's advance stalled as the house became a fortress. But Seong-jin was still trapped inside with them. Sarah found the intercom system, her voice shaking as she spoke. "Seong-jin, if you can hear me, north hallway, second door. It's unlocked. I'm opening a path." On the monitor, she saw him look up, searching for cameras. She triggered the door releases, creating a route from his position to the stairwell. He moved immediately, covering his retreat with controlled bursts of gunfire. One of the tactical team broke off to pursue him. Sarah watched helpless as the man raised his weapon. Without thinking, she found the emergency controls and triggered the fire suppression system in that hallway. Foam erupted from ceiling vents, blinding the pursuer, buying Seong-jin seconds. He made it to the stairs. "Third floor," Sarah said into the intercom. "We're in the panic room. Hurry." The next 3 minutes lasted a lifetime. Sarah tracked the tactical team on monitors. They were searching systematically, professionals who knew exactly what they were looking for. One found the stairwell Seong-jin had used. Sarah triggered another suppression system, then the emergency lighting, plunging sections of the house into darkness. She was buying time, nothing more. Eventually, they'd find the panic room. Eventually, the systems would fail. Byung tugged her sleeve, pointing at a monitor. One of the tactical team was setting something against a wall, an explosive device. They weren't trying to capture anyone. They were planning to destroy the entire estate. "Sarah!" Seong-jin's voice crackled through the intercom, weak but urgent. "I'm outside the panic room. Let me in." She opened the door, and he stumbled inside, blood soaking through his shirt from shoulder and side wounds. The door sealed behind him with a hydraulic hiss. "Dad!" Byung broke his characteristic silence, running to his father. "I'm okay, son," Seong-jin lied, collapsing against the wall. His face was pale, his breathing labored. "Sarah, the monitors. Who are they?" She'd already been studying the tactical gear, the movements. "Professional. Military trained. This isn't gang warfare." "No." His laugh turned into a cough. "This is Kong. He hired contractors. Probably told them I'd be alone up here with minimal security." "How long until your people arrive?" "Called them when the shooting started. 40 minutes minimum from Seoul." He met her eyes. "That explosive they're setting. I saw it. We have maybe 15 minutes before they blow the support wall. This room will hold, but the house will collapse. We'll be buried alive." Sarah's mind raced through options, through training she'd never expected to use. She looked at the weapons cabinet, the communications array, the monitors showing 4 armed professionals systematically preparing to entomb them. "Can you shoot?" she asked Seong-jin. "Not accurately. Lost too much blood." His eyes were starting to unfocus. "Sarah, listen, if I don't make it, there's a protocol. My lawyer has instructions. You and Byung will be protected, provided for." "Stop." She moved to the weapons cabinet, selected the smallest handgun, checked the safety the way her father had taught her a lifetime ago. "You're not dying today. And neither are we. What are you doing?" "Something stupid." She pulled up the security panel, studied the layout, formed a desperate plan. "The panic room has an emergency exit, doesn't it? For fire." "Yes, but it leads straight into the hallway where they're not looking because they think we're trapped." Sarah checked the monitors again. They're all focused on setting the explosive and watching the main entrance. No one's covering the auxiliary exit. "Sarah, you can't. I can buy us time." She looked at Byung, then at Seong-jin, her decision crystallizing. "Stay here. Keep Byung safe. I'm going to stop them from blowing this house." Seong-jin grabbed her wrist, his grip weak but desperate. "You're not trained for this. They'll kill you. Then teach me fast." She met his eyes. "Tell me how to survive the next 10 minutes. What followed was the most intense tactical briefing of Sarah's life. Seong-jin's fading voice walking her through sight lines, cover positions, how to move, when to shoot. Byung clung to his father, silent tears streaming, understanding that Sarah was about to do something they might not survive. "Promise me," Seong-jin whispered as she prepared to leave. "Promise me if it goes wrong, you'll run. Save yourself." Sarah touched his face gently. "I'm done running." She opened the auxiliary exit into darkness and terror, carrying a weapon she'd never wanted to hold, hunting men who killed for money. Behind her, she heard Byung's voice, small, broken, speaking for the first time since the nightmare began. "Come back, Mama. Please come back." Sarah didn't answer. Couldn't. Because she had no idea if she was walking toward survival or toward the ending she'd been running from all along. But Byung had called her Mama. And that meant some promises were worth dying to keep. Sarah had never killed anyone before. She'd spent her career saving people. Children, families, broken souls seeking repair. But as she moved through the darkened hallway, weapon trembling in her hands, she understood that survival sometimes demanded choices that shattered who you thought you were. The explosive device was set against the structural wall, digital timer glowing red. 7 minutes. The man guarding it had his back to her, confident in the belief that everyone was contained in the panic room. Sarah's psychology training had taught her to read people, to understand motivation and fear. It had never taught her how to shoot someone. Her hands steadied. Not because she was brave, but because Byung's voice echoed in her mind. "Come back, Mama." She aimed the way Seong-jin had instructed. Center mass, exhale, squeeze. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. The man dropped, and Sarah's stomach revolted, but her body kept moving. She ran to the device, staring at wires and circuits she didn't understand. 6 minutes. "Sarah." Seong-jin's voice crackled through the earpiece she'd taken. "Red wire. Left side. Cut it." Her hands found the wire cutters from the device's kit. "Are you sure?" "No. But it's our best option." She cut. The timer continued counting. 5 minutes. 40 seconds. Blue wire. Bottom cluster. Sarah cut again. This time, the timer flickered. Then reset. Then went dark. She allowed herself 3 seconds of relief before hearing footsteps. Heavy, running, converging on her position. The remaining 3 contractors had heard the gunshot. Sarah ran, her movements graceless but driven by pure adrenaline. Bullets chewed through the wall behind her. She dove into a side room, Seong-jin's study, and overturned the desk for cover. "They're going to flank you," Seong-jin's voice was fading. weakening from blood loss. Window behind you. Second floor.
You can drop to the roof below. I can't leave you.
Sarah, please. The door exploded inward. 2 contractors entered tactically, weapons raised. Sarah fired blindly over the desk, missed, fired again. 1 man grunted, staggered. Not dead, but wounded. The window. She scrambled toward it, crashed through glass and frame, landed hard on the lower roof. Pain exploded through her shoulder, but she rolled, kept moving. Behind her, the contractors were shouting in English now. Target is mobile, 2nd floor exterior, and she realized they'd been hired from overseas, professionals with no loyalty except to payment. That gave her an idea. Sarah found her voice shouting in English. Seong-jin is dead. Your employer lied to you. Seoul police are 5 minutes out. You'll be blamed for killing a crime boss. Korea doesn't extradite. You'll die in prison here. The shouting behind her paused. She'd planted doubt. Check the panic room, she continued, making her voice sound confident despite terror. Your target is already gone. You're not getting paid. Cut your losses and run. Silence. Then the tactical team's radio chatter, arguing. Sarah had introduced uncertainty into their mission, and uncertainty was poison to professionals. She used the confusion to circle back, entering through a ground floor window. Her shoulder screamed. Blood ran down her arm. Hers or someone else's, she couldn't tell. The house was a maze of shadows and danger, but she knew where she needed to be. The panic room. Seong-jin. Byung. She found the auxiliary entrance just as Seong-jin collapsed against the door from inside, too weak to stand. Through the crack, she saw Byung trying to hold his father upright, the boy's small frame shaking with effort. I'm here, Sarah whispered, opening the door. I'm here. Seong-jin's eyes found hers, unfocused but aware. You came back. Always. She pulled his arm over her shoulder, supporting his weight. Can you walk? Not far. The sound of vehicles outside. Multiple engines, doors slamming. Seong-jin's reinforcements had arrived early, or the contractors had fled. Either way, the siege was ending. Sarah held Seong-jin upright as his security team flooded the estate, their shouts of "Clear!" echoing through shattered rooms. Medics appeared, tried to take Seong-jin from her, but his hand gripped her wrist. Don't leave, he said, and she realized he wasn't giving an order. He was asking. I won't. They transported him to a private hospital, one of the facilities the syndicate controlled where gunshot wounds didn't require police reports. Sarah sat in the waiting room still covered in blood, Seong-jin's, the contractor's, her own, while Byung slept fitfully in her lap. The surgeon emerged 3 hours later. He'll survive. The shoulder wound was clean, but he lost significant blood. Another hour and... The doctor paused meaningfully. You saved his life. Sarah nodded numbly, too exhausted for words. It was dawn when Seong-jin woke, groggy from anesthesia. Sarah was sitting beside his bed, Byung curled in the chair next to her. Seong-jin's eyes cleared slowly, finding her face. You're still here. Where else would I be? He tried to sit up, winced, gave up. Sarah, His voice cracked. You could have run. Should have run. You could have taken Byung and disappeared. Been free of all this. I know. Then why? Sarah thought about all the clinical answers she could give, all the professional distance she could maintain. Then she abandoned them all. Because you're my family. Both of you. And I'm done losing family. Seong-jin's expression shattered. For the first time since she'd known him, tears tracked down his face. I can't do this anymore, he whispered. This life. This empire. I watched you risk everything, become something you're not, kill someone, almost die, and I realized I've been building a cage. For you. For Byung. For myself. Seong-jin. No, listen.
He reached for her hand with his uninjured arm.
Kong will try again. The syndicate will always be a target. There will always be men willing to kill for power, territory, revenge. I've spent 20 years building an empire, and last night I discovered it's worth nothing compared to, he stopped, struggling with words he'd never learned to say.
Compared to what?
Sarah prompted gently. Compared to watching my son sleep peacefully. Compared to conversations on terraces.
Compared to you.
His grip tightened. I can't have both. The empire or the family. And last night, when I thought I'd lost you both, the choice became very clear. Sarah's breath caught.
What are you saying? I'm saying I'm done.
I'm liquidating everything. The clubs, the shipping routes, the protection rackets. All of it. I have enough legitimate businesses to transition.
It'll take time and it'll be dangerous, but... He met her eyes.
I want out. For Byung. For you.
For the possibility of being someone other than the dragon.
Your rivals will see it as weakness. Let them. I'll make deals, pay reparations, whatever it takes. But I'm not raising my son in a world where the woman he loves gets ambushed in our own home. His voice dropped. I'm not losing you the way I lost Minasio. The confession hung between them. Raw, terrifying, real. Sarah leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. Then we do it together. All of it. The transition, the danger, the reinvention. But Seong-jin, you need to be sure. Because once you walk away, there's no going back.
I've never been more sure of anything.
Byung stirred in his chair, waking slowly. His eyes found his father, then Sarah, registering that they were both alive, both present. He climbed onto the hospital bed carefully, curling between them. We're okay? He asked, his voice small but clear. Seong-jin wrapped his good arm around his son.
We're okay. All of us.
Byung looked at Sarah.
We're staying together?
Sarah felt something break and heal simultaneously in her chest. All of us.
Forever.
Outside, Seoul was waking to a new day. And inside the hospital room, a broken family was learning what it meant to choose each other over everything else. The empire could burn. The dragon could fall. But this, 3 people who'd found each other through trauma and survived through love, this was worth every sacrifice. This was worth starting over. The transition took 8 months. 8 months of careful negotiations, strategic exits, and dangerous conversations with men who saw Seong-jin's departure as either weakness or betrayal. There were threats. 2 more assassination attempts. Nights when Sarah woke to find Seong-jin staring out windows, second-guessing everything. But he never turned back. He liquidated the criminal holdings systematically, selling territories to rivals, dissolving protection rackets, converting illegal shipping routes to legitimate maritime trade. His legitimate businesses, the hotels, the tech investments, the real estate holdings, provided enough foundation to rebuild on legal ground. Kang Dae-young tried to capitalize on the perceived vulnerability, making a play for Seong-jin's former territory. But Seong-jin had played his final hand brilliantly, forming alliances with law enforcement, providing enough information to cripple his rivals without fully exposing himself. Kang was arrested on trafficking charges 3 months into the transition. The message was clear. Seong-jin might be leaving, but he was leaving on his terms. Sarah watched him transform. The man who'd commanded through fear learned to lead through strategy. The dragon who'd built an empire on violence discovered he was equally capable of building one on vision. He was still formidable, still occasionally terrifying, but the edge of cruelty had been replaced with something more sustainable. Purpose. They moved out of the Gangnam estate. Too many ghosts in those marble halls. The new house was smaller, modern, in a quiet neighborhood where children played in the streets. It had a garden where Byung could run, a kitchen where Sarah could cook without staff hovering, windows that let in light instead of monitoring threats. It felt like a home. Sarah had stopped running too. With Seong-jin's resources, they'd negotiated her situation. paid off the right people in New York, ensured her safety through channels she didn't fully understand. She was no longer hiding. She'd even started practicing again, taking consultation cases remotely, rediscovering the part of herself she'd thought was lost. Byung flourished. The selective mutism faded as the stability solidified. He spoke more each week, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. He still had nightmares, still carried the scars of early trauma, but he was healing in the way children do when they finally feel safe. And Sarah and Seong-jin, they'd stopped pretending their relationship was professional. It had happened gradually, without dramatic declarations. A hand held too long. Conversations that stretched past midnight. The night she'd found him in the kitchen at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, and instead of retreating to her room she'd stayed, just sitting with him in comfortable silence until dawn. The first kiss came 3 months after the hospital, soft and tentative, both of them terrified of breaking something fragile. But they hadn't broken. They'd built. Now, 8 months after the mountain siege, they stood in Namsan Park on a Sunday afternoon, watching Byung play with other children on the grass. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the smell of roasting chestnuts from nearby vendors. Ordinary life. The kind Sarah had forgotten existed. Seong-jin's hand found hers, fingers interlacing naturally. He'd learned to touch without possessing, to love without controlling. She'd learned to stay without feeling trapped. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Giving up everything you built?" He considered the question seriously, the way he approached everything now, with thought instead of instinct. "I gave up power. I didn't give up everything." He gestured toward Byung, laughing as he kicked a soccer ball. "I gained this." "Gained you?" "Gained the possibility of growing old without constantly watching my back. It's not too late, you know. If you wanted to go back." "Sarah." He turned to face her fully. "I spent 20 years becoming someone I thought I needed to be. Strong. Feared. Untouchable. And I was miserable. Now he paused, searching for the word. "I'm happy. Genuinely happy." "When was the last time you heard me say that?" She smiled. "Never, actually." "Exactly." He kissed her forehead. "You saved me. Not just at the mountain. Every day since Byung chose you. You've been saving me from becoming the kind of man who loses everything that matters." "You saved yourself," Sarah corrected. "I just reminded you that you could." Byung ran toward them, breathless and flushed with joy. He'd made friends easily. One of the other children had invited him to join their game. The boy who'd been silent for 2 years was now chattering about soccer strategies and playground politics. "Mom, Dad," he said, the words still new enough that they all paused to appreciate them. "Can we come back here next week? Jae-sung's mom said they come every Sunday, and he wants to teach me how to." He stopped abruptly, his expression shifting to something more serious. "What is it, sweetheart?" Sarah asked. Byung looked between them, then spoke carefully, like he was translating thoughts into a language he was still learning. "I just wanted to say, I'm really glad you stayed. Both of you. When I was little, I thought everyone leaves eventually. But you didn't. Even when it was scary. Even when people tried to hurt us. You stayed." Sarah's throat tightened. Seong-jin's hand squeezed hers. "And I know I don't say it enough," Byung continued, his voice gaining confidence. "But I love you. Both of you. And I'm not scared anymore that you'll disappear because I know," he paused, finding the words. "I know that we're a real family now. The kind that stays together no matter what." It was the longest, most articulate thing he'd ever said. Each word was a testament to healing, to the safety they'd built together, to the love that had transformed them all. Sarah knelt down, pulling Byung into a hug. "We're not going anywhere," she whispered fiercely. "Ever. You're stuck with us." "Good," Byung said, hugging her back. Then he pulled away, grinning. "Can I go play now?" They laughed, real, unguarded laughter, and released him back to the playground, back to the ordinary magic of childhood. Seong-jin and Sarah stood together, watching him run, watching him exist in a world where he could be loud and careless and safe. The dragon who'd ruled Seoul's underworld and the psychologist who'd fled her past, both of them learning that the greatest revolution wasn't changing the world, it was having the courage to change yourself.
"Thank you," Seong-jin said quietly.
For what?
"For seeing who I could become before I did.
For believing I was worth saving." Sarah leaned into him, fitting against his side like she'd always belonged there.
"We saved each other.
That's how family works." The sun filtered through autumn leaves, painting everything gold. In the distance, Byung's laughter rang clear and bright, the sound of a child who'd finally found his voice. And in that moment, standing in an ordinary park on an ordinary Sunday, they were just what they'd fought so hard to become, a family. Not perfect, not undamaged, but together and healing, and finally at peace with the language they'd created. A language not of power or fear, but of staying, of choosing each other, of love that survived everything the world threw against it.
Seong-jin had left the Mafia.
Sarah had stopped running.
Byung had found his voice.
And together, they'd built something no empire could rival. A home where broken people could become whole. The dragon had found his treasure after all. It just looked different than he'd ever imagined. Softer, kinder, infinitely more precious.
It looked like family.
And it was worth every sacrifice to keep. Sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't fighting. It's choosing to heal. Seong-jin learned that power without love is just another prison. Sarah discovered that running from your past doesn't free you. Facing it with people who refuse to let you fall does. And Byung found his voice when he finally felt safe enough to speak. Their story reminds us that families aren't always built through blood. Sometimes they're built through choice, through staying when leaving would be easier, through loving people despite their broken edges.
We all carry wounds.
We all wear masks to survive. But true strength lies in removing those masks with people who prove their worth the vulnerability. If you're fighting your own battles, remember, it's never too late to choose differently. To walk away from what destroys you. To build something real with people who see you, all of you, and stay anyway. Thank you for watching this journey with us. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to keep experiencing these emotional narratives together. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell us in the comments. What was your favorite moment? Where are you watching from? Your support means everything. Until the next story, remember, you deserve a love that chooses you every single day.